Hello, and welcome to this video on learning to identify and name molecular compounds. The prior knowledge you should have before starting this lesson is understanding what molecules are, and the ways in which we name and identify ionic compounds. So far we have only discussed ionic compounds, which is the bonding of a metal and non-metal. Molecular compounds are different than ionic compounds. They consist of the bonding between two non-metals. Whereas ionic compounds are made of ions, molecular compounds consist of molecules. In case you forgot, molecules form when two or more non-metallic atoms bond together. Non-metallic atoms can be the same type of atom, such as oxygen gas. Oxygen gas is an example of a molecular element, as it forms molecules made of one type of atom. Oxygen gas can also be called diatomic, as each molecule is made of two atoms. Other diatomic molecules include hydrogen, nitrogen, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. In addition, there can be polyatomic molecular atoms such as ozone, which is made of 3 atoms, phosphorus, which is made of 4 atoms, and sulfur, which is made of 8 atoms. There are also molecules that have different types of atoms, such as water, which consists of 1 oxygen atom and 2 hydrogen atoms bonded together, or methanol, which is made of 1 carbon atom, 4 hydrogen atoms, and 1 oxygen atom bonded together. There are many more examples of polyatomic molecular compounds. Unlike ionic compounds, in which electrons are transferred, atoms in molecular compounds are joined together by covalent bonds. Covalent bonds form when atoms share electrons. A covalent bond consists of 2 electrons, often called a pair of electrons, that are shared between 2 atoms. For example, a molecule of chlorine gas is created when 2 atoms of chlorine share 2 electrons to form a covalent bond. In some covalent bonds, the atoms share more than 2 electrons. For example, nitrogen gas often occurs in the form of N2, shown here. An atom of nitrogen has 5 valence electrons. To form N2, 2 nitrogen atoms share 6 electrons, or 3 pairs of electrons which form 3 individual covalent bonds. Here's another example, carbon dioxide. In carbon dioxide, all atoms share 2 pairs of electrons so that each atom has a complete valence shell and is stable. Since ionic compounds and molecular compounds are different, they have different rules when it comes to naming compounds. We will begin with naming molecular compounds that do not contain hydrogen. IUPAC, the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, rules for naming molecular compounds that do not contain hydrogen are similar to rules for naming ionic compounds. In step 1, you name the first element as it is on your periodic table. In step 2, you name the second element but replace the ending of the name with I, D, E. The third step is what differs between ionic and molecular compounds. In molecular compounds, we add Greek prefixes to indicate how many atoms of each element are present in the compound. Let's look at N2O. To name this compound, we take the first element and name it as it is on the periodic table, nitrogen. We then name the second element and replace the ending with IDE, so oxygen becomes oxide. With molecular compounds, we go the step further and we use Greek prefixes to indicate how many atoms of each element are present in the compound. In Greek, di equals 2 and mono equals 1. So therefore, the name of N2O is dinitrogen monoxide. Here's the list of Greek prefixes for naming molecular compounds. You will need to memorize these prefixes. They will always go at the beginning of the element. That is why it is a prefix. Please note, in addition, that the word mono is only used in the second element of a molecular compound. It is never used for the first element of a molecular compound. We will now do some practice problems. Feel free to grab a pen or paper or figure out how to do these problems in your head. Our next example is PBr3. We begin by naming the first element, phosphorus, as it is on the periodic table. We then name the second element, bromine, but we change the ending to bromide. We then add prefixes. Remember, for the first element in a molecular compound, we never use the prefix mono, so we simply need the prefix tri to equal 3. Therefore, the name for PBr3 is phosphorus tribromide. Here's another example, carbon monoxide. We begin by naming the first element, carbon. We then name the second element, oxygen, but we change the ending to IDE, so oxygen becomes oxide. We then add prefixes. Remember, mono is only used if the second element in a molecular compound only has one atom. So therefore, the name for CO is carbon monoxide. Here's our next example, CCl4. We begin by naming the first element as it appears on the periodic table, carbon. We then name the second element, chlorine, but we change the ending to IDE, so chlorine becomes chloride. We then add prefixes. Remember, the prefix mono is only used for the second element, and because carbon is the first element, we do not use the prefix. However, for the second element, chlorine, there are 4 atoms, so we will use the prefix tetra. Therefore, the name of CCl4 is carbon tetrachloride. Here is our last example, P4O10. We begin, as we always do, by naming the first element as it is on the periodic table, phosphorus. We then name the second element, oxygen, but we change the ending to IDE, so oxygen becomes oxide. We then add prefixes. Tetra equals 4, and the word deca equals 10. So therefore, the name of this molecular compound is tetraphosphorus decaoxide. If you need more help, please see page 49 in your textbook. We will now address molecular compounds that contain hydrogen. Hydrogen is unique in many ways, and this is reflected in its naming system. As a result, many compounds that contain hydrogen have simply been given names. For example, H2O is commonly referred to as water instead of dihydrogen monoxide. The following is a list of 8 molecular atoms that contain hydrogen, and unfortunately, all of them have to be memorized. These compounds can also be found on page 49 in your textbook. The molecules are water, hydrogen peroxide, ammonia, sucrose, methane, propane, methanol, ethanol, and hydrogen sulfide. You will need to know both the name of these molecular compounds and the formula. Using these 8 compounds and the rules outlined earlier, you should be able to identify and name molecular compounds. If you are confused still, please read in your textbook or talk to your teacher for further clarification. Good luck!